No one cheers for your content. No one's going to cheer, oh, wow, that is a great quarterly report. Have you ever seen that happen? Of course not. That just isn't how people work. But people remember how you make them feel. They don't remember the facts, but they remember how you make them feel. And how you make them feel when you're sending out value added messages about them, about their money, about problems they may have, about things you've done for them. They feel cared for. They are sure you care about them. And many advisors do a good job at making their clients feel cared for. So don't get me wrong, but this is another way to ensure across the entire client base, if you've got 100, 200 clients, that they feel that, right? This is the way to systematize
and
that
scale.
sense of caring and scale it.
This is the Future Ready Advisor, a show about transforming your financial advisory practice. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, a wealth management consultant, behavioral scientist, and keynote speaker. In this podcast, I dive deep into the real challenges advisors face and bring you insightful conversations with top industry experts. Together, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in behavioral science to help you better serve your clients, optimize your time, and build a future-ready practice. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan. Welcome to today's episode of the Future Ready Advisor. Today, I'm here with John Prendergast, founder of Blue Leaf, a wealth management software firm with a focus on client engagement and experience. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam, thanks for having me, man. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Me as well. Let me quickly introduce you to our audience. John is the co-founder and CEO of Blue Leaf, and he also serves as the Chief Product Officer. He is an experienced entrepreneur and senior executive, as well as an active startup advisor. He's been part of 6 founding teams, leading the product management, marketing, and finance functions. And it is his background in banking and wealth management that has shaped the vision for Blue Leaf. John, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think client experience and client engagement is so important in our industry, and technology is going to play a really critical part. But before we dive in, you've had a diverse career before becoming the CEO of Blue Leaf. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and what led you to start Blue Leaf?
Yes, diverse. Some would say unfocused. For me, I'd say I have always followed my muse, and I've been lucky enough to operate at a pretty high level in what I've tried. And I've always loved finance, and I actually paid my way through college by trading and made a fair amount of money in the very early days of Apple. And I got hooked, and that's been a theme throughout. But of course, college for me, a computer science degree and an economics degree. So I've always combined those two things. And then immediately while I'm in school, I decided, I know I'm majoring in computer science and economics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a restaurant. And I became one of the first Boston Chicken franchisees. If you remember that business, became Boston Market and eventually was bought by McDonald's. But I love business. Just generally, I love building teams and I love finance. And so I've explored all various aspects of those businesses. I spent a couple of years as an advisor, so I know how hard it really is. And I know that I'm not cut out for that, but combining that understanding and my knowledge of software and product development, that's what eventually led to Blue Leaf.
Niche or hole in the market do you think that led you to create Blue Leaf? What is the problem that Blue Leaf is solving in your view?
Sure. I mean, when you talk creation, this is a very different time. We've been around since 2011, 2012, when we first served our very first customers. And at the time, the idea of an interactive client portal was actually novel. That was new. And so that's sort of where we started. And that's been a thread throughout, which is why we talk about client engagement being sort of our North Star, because we believe that everything that an advisor does is about the client. If you're doing reporting, it's about the client. If you're doing trading and rebalancing, it's about the client. Even if you're doing billing and some back office processes, you can draw a direct line from whatever you do in your practice all the way out to the client. So that's what guides us. We think about how do we help the advisor do more and better for their clients? How do we enable them to do what they do and be more focused? And a big piece of that we realized is how engaged clients were with their advisors and how it was very challenging for advisors to stay in touch with clients at the cadence that is now required. And so that became a real area of specialty for us, an area of focus, and really everything we do is about supporting that mission so that advisors can better serve their clients.
And one of the ways that clients or advisors serve clients is this idea of touch points with clients.
Yeah.
When we talked before, you mentioned that a good target number was, to me, an astounding number, is a 70 to 75 engagements a year. And you make the point, which I totally agree with, that quarterly statements and yearly reviews are not enough anymore. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to up that ante. I'm going to say that actually double that would be ideal. So up to 150 touch points a year. And that is what many of the very fastest growing advisors in the industry do. And it's what Jason Wank did, the founder of Altruist, who was a customer of ours. And we really learned from people like him. But if you think about it, two things. One, if you imagine, there's 365 days a year, maybe you send out 4 quarterly reports, you might do an annual meeting or annual update with a couple of other touch points. You might get 15 touch points a year in a typical advisory firm done traditionally. So that leaves, 380 days a year where your clients are not hearing from you. So what is your service? What's your service offering? Your service is actually silence. That's what you're delivering to clients. You're delivering silence. Yet results, et cetera, but that implies that the client will take those scattered touch points and put it together that, oh yeah, I need to pay attention to the results that Sam's giving me. And that just isn't the way that people work. At the same time, the world has moved on and world has really changed, where if you think about services like Netflix or Facebook, my guess is you have an email or another message in your inbox or on your mobile phone that has pinged you to give you a suggestion or some other value added connection to you that might tell you something great to watch on television tonight. And that might tell you your friend just did X and Y and Z. And we're used to being contacted almost daily by most of our favorite services. And advice just conceptually, advisors still live in the land of the thing that I personally do with my client. And what we're suggesting is client engagement paradigm has shifted. It's much bigger. It's how does you engage, but how does your firm engage? How do other employees engage with clients? It's how do you create content that engages clients? It's how do you support simple messaging, simple reporting that engages clients so that they're hearing from you 2 or 3 different times a week, but in different ways. I made a post the other day on LinkedIn and got a comment, my God, I can't imagine connecting with my clients that frequently. And then I laid it out how, well, once a week, it might be the firm sending an email. Once a week, it might be a report that's sent automatically once a week, or every other week, it might be an update about a service that you delivered, or another member of your team sending a video saying, hey, Sam, we just did this for you. Just wanted to let you know. None of those are redundant. They don't feel like you're hitting them over and over. I think conceptually where we break and where we think it's bad, clients would hate it, is when we think about sending the same message over and over and over again. And that is not at all what we're recommending. No one would want that. What we're talking about, finding a way to make your services more integrated with the life your client leads.
I really like that, John. To your point, it's not about hitting them over the head with the same message. It's about being creative, imaginative, and unobtrusive. One of the things that you mentioned when we chatted before that really hit home with me is this idea of noisy service. Can you talk a little bit about that as a way of dealing with this kind of touch point issue that we talked about?
Absolutely. We love the idea of noisy service. So if you've never heard of noisy service, this is the idea that most of the things that you do in your firm for clients are silence. That again is the service you're tending to provide. It's nothing. It's that tree falling in the forest. But what noisy service does is it says, okay, add 30 to 60 seconds on that moment of service in the back office. That might be a quick review of accounts. It might be a quick analysis to see if something needs a rebalance, and then simply report that to the client. Maybe grabbing your phone and doing a quick little video that says, hey, Sam, we just reviewed your accounts. We were trying to see if they needed to be rebalanced. They look really great. Keep doing what you're doing, and just wanted to check in, send, and you touch them. Now you've made an intangible service quite tangible. Not only that, but you've started to create a relationship potentially beyond you with the rest of your firm, with your service teammates and the people who also support your clients. It's a complete game changer. And we use a video service called Loom to do this. There are others you could do it. And advisors that are doing this today have reported all kinds of benefits. The advisor gets their time back. The client's more comfortable talking to other service members. The client refers more because they feel like they're getting more service, even though it's the same amount of service as before. They just know about it for the first time in most cases. So that's noisy service.
I want to pick up on something that you mentioned. This is the emails that you get from Netflix or Spotify that we've suddenly become used to, and we get this on daily. And this is the idea of an engagement loop that Netflix or Spotify does. Can you explain the term and expand on how Blue Leaf captures that concept in the financial advice world and helps advisors create those sort of engagement loops?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about most client portals or even mobile apps, they are kind of standalone experiences. And they sit and they wait for somebody to show up because that client must have had a question. But Facebook isn't sitting there waiting for you to show up. They're reaching out. Netflix isn't sitting there waiting for you to show up. They're reaching out, reminding you of the value available to you, and then creating simple ways for you to connect back, right? So it's that outreach with a simple way to connect back that creates the loop of engagement. And with that, you can see client engagement rates skyrocket, client satisfaction skyrocket. And we believe that all systems should be doing this, but of course that isn't the case. And maybe that's my product background come to bear here. But what we wanted to do is make sure that advisors were delivering to their clients the very best possible experience. And where you see that is in consumer services around the web. So we took that concept and we applied it squarely to a financial advisory business.
That's an interesting concept. And when you were talking, it reminded me of my own experience. So I've signed up for a credit monitoring app, and something as mundane and relatively one-dimensional as your credit rating and what's happening to your credit rating. This app sends me, I'm thinking, one email a week at least, to say, hey, there's potential new credit cards that I could sign up for, or say there's been activity in my credit report and, do I want to engage with it? So the idea of sending, I would say, different types of touch points that encourages the client to, well, at least have the choice whether they choose to engage with it, or at the very least, it's a passive reminder that I've got a team of wealth advisor and their team working for me, even when I'm not paying attention. I don't have to do anything more than just see that email, delete it, but I still register in my brain that I'm getting a touch point and a reach out from my advisor.
Right. And I think the trick here, and you used a really good example, because in that example, you both had service-oriented message and then promotional messaging. And generally what we're recommending to most advisors is to, severely limit the promotional messaging. What you want is lots and lots of value-added content. So it might be an automated report that just simply says, likelihood of your succeeding in your plan changed over the last month. It could be a message that's here's how your balance sheet changed, or here's what happened this week in your accounts, right? Very, 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 very simple. And it could also be on the content side, it could be you take your marketing, which most good marketing is going to be problem solution oriented. Did you just receive RSUs? Did you know that RSUs can create a tax problem for you? If so, here's the ways that you need to think about it. You should give us a call and we can help you and connect you with a tax professional, that sort of thing. Problem solution oriented content. That's very value added, right? So we think it's more about the value added touch points with information about how to solve problems, information about what's happening in my accounts, information about the kind of services we're providing to you, even though you're not aware of them in the back, and creating a volume of messaging
Mhm.
based on that. And it becomes quite powerful. And you also said it, top of mind. You don't get referrals unless you are top of mind, right? That just doesn't happen. And what we've seen is the consistency of referrals really ramp up and or the volume. So it's quite a powerful combination.
The advisors are working, as you say, when they're delivering what they're doing, when they're providing this quiet service, what they're not aware of in many cases, or they are aware, they're actually struggling behind the scenes with the narrative their clients are receiving from external sources, whether it is the latest influencer on social media, CNBC, or Jim Cramer. So this is happening, that the client is getting influenced or inundated with these messages. The advisor is perhaps not responding or not proactively responding to some of those things. How do you advise financial advisors to counteract these external influences and maintain client trust?
Yeah. So when Jim Cramer honks his horn, when the latest influencer on TikTok, tells your client that this is an insurance secret of the rich. We've all seen these, right? When that happens, you have to be there alongside of that message. You have to be in your client's inbox or otherwise contacting them with what we call a counter narrative. So basically, this is the idea that you need to repeatedly tell your client's story back to them and how their money fits into the world and what's really happening, so that they have a base narrative that they hang on to, that they then compare all of these other stupid messages to. Because then it's your narrative is their narrative. And that is now the story that they
Mhm.
live by. And those silly things coming in from media are a fact fighting a story. The problem when you don't show up in their inbox is the story is created by Jim
Yep.
Cramer or some TikTok influencer. And that sort of becomes a jumbled mess in their story. And now when you say, don't worry, that's the fact fighting the story. So we advise creating a counter narrative, the idea, a story, simple story, right? This isn't like paragraphs, but this idea, look, your money is not the market. There are no secrets. There's simple tactics that on repeat get you where you need to go. And by sticking to this and being focused on the prize, eyes on the prize, you're going to get there. Anybody who tells you different is a charlatan. And repeat, 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 right? That's how you make your clients resilient to the nonsense on TikTok.
Look, I think one of the interesting things is, as much as that noise is there on TikTok or CNBC, I think if you get that core message of your story right, you're actually being provided opportunities to create touch points or have touch points with their clients, because this narrative from Jim Cramer or influencers, et cetera, is a weekly thing. I mean, you don't have to respond every week.
Daily. It's daily. Yeah,
Right.
it's daily out there.
You've got
Media never
an
ceases.
opportunity you have an opportunity every time there is there, or periodically when you get these narratives, to use that as a touch point, one of
Exactly.
your 150 a year, et cetera. Use that as an opportunity to provide the counter narrative, but that becomes one of your touch points.
Exactly. And look, we're not saying that anybody needs to go from, 15, touch points a year to 150, a 10x increase. Just start, right? Start, add the thing that you can add, right? If you're a new customer on Blueleaf, you might add those automated, financial updates. If you've got marketing materials, go take a look at that. Could those be repurposed to point directly to clients? In many cases, they can, and they'd be very value added. Right?
Mhm.
Just find the next thing and take that one next step. You don't have to go all the way to the top of the mountain. Climb up 100 feet. See what you think. See how the air is, and take it a step at a time.
Yeah, totally agree. All of this is small wins. A marathon is 1 kilometer at a time. You don't run it all at once. Now, let's shift gears a little bit. Technology is a very important part of all industries, but particular wealth management. But I would say in the call it the retail or the high net worth wealth space, technology often gets criticized for poor service, pricing, and usability. At the end of the day, if the advisor and the client are not using the technology in the way it's designed, it's not fit for purpose. What would you say about that and that concept that I just laid out, and how is your company addressing these issues to provide a more seamless and efficient experience for advisors and their clients?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Sam. So let's take the idea of usability, usage and usability. This is one of the reasons that we're so focused on client engagement, right? One of the biggest complaints we hear from advisors is I've got a portal and no one uses it. And some advisors assume that's because my clients aren't online or they don't want this because they haven't asked for it. But of course, they're on Facebook, they're doing a bunch of other things. So it's very clear that your clients are online. It's just that the thing you've handed them just isn't engaging, right? So not all technology, not all client portals are created equal. They just aren't. And it's why very few companies like us provide engagement statistics. Ours is right on our dashboard because we think you ought to know. So one is you have to actually have engaging technology for all of this to work. The other disappointment, of course, is pricing. Many advisors this year in particular have experienced big price increases from some of the larger players in the industry. Why? Because they felt like they could, right? You know, the consolidation of TD and Schwab made everybody feel like, oh, look, consolidation. Now there's less choice. So let's jam prices up. And there are pretty big price increases. We have a pretty different philosophy at Blue Leaf. We've held our pricing for since 2014. We haven't had a price increase. The only increases our customers experience are if they buy additional services or if they use the system more. We think that's fair and it's the right way to do business. We're not trying to gouge. We're trying to have a fair, very long-term relationship, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of customers that have been with us between 5 and 10 years. So we're clearly doing something right. The other thing, technology alone doesn't solve these problems, right? Technology is a tool, but technology by itself does not create, it's all right. Drill is an example, right? The drill by itself doesn't create the hole, right? You need the drill plus the person. And so this idea of support, right, that you mentioned, is really, really critical. Everybody talks about having great support, and but it's such a hard thing to evaluate at the outset. So we talk a lot about our own statistics, and how we've got between 92 and 98% client satisfaction on any given month. That we have time to resolution of under 10 minutes on our queue. But I think structurally, the thing that is so different about what we do at Blue Leaf is, unlike virtually every other provider, we actually directly support your clients, right? So if your clients are on our platform, you don't support them. You don't have to deal with password reset or questions about account aggregation or any of those things. Our team does that for you as an extension of your team. And that's really, really unique. And we've had to do a lot of gymnastics to organize our team to be able to stretch that far. Because if you think about it, that means a Blue Leaf support team for the same number of customers or number of advisors is supporting somewhere between 50 and 100 times more users than your typical support team, which we're quite proud of.
And along those lines, simplicity in product design and incorporating the behavioral aspect of client interactions is very important. How do you create a simple yet effective engagement system with Blue Leaf?
Yeah. So if you want to create an easy to use service or product, there's one word you need to bear in mind: humility. Now, what do I mean by that? It is about suspending your assumptions about what that client needs or what that user needs, what that advisor needs. In our case, we have obviously advisors and clients as users, and is about actually testing that. It's not even necessarily listening to what people say. It's watching very carefully what they do and being humble about what we think we know and what we don't know. And we rely very heavily on testing in order to do that. So that is a huge key, because most advisor software is built in the land of shoulds. You should have this, you should do this, you always need this. And what we've found by being humble and focusing on direct research is that most of those are just pollution, just nonsense. The other thing is, and this is kind of the bonus tip, if you're trying to make something really simple, focus on the little tiny details. And what I mean by the little tiny details in, say, piece of software and its interface, little details like, what is that button called? What's that menu item labeled, right? How many clicks do I need to get? That's an obvious one. But the little elements of copy and the language that you use, is that the language that your customer uses, your client uses? In most cases, it's the language that the product team or the engineers thought they should use, as opposed to being careful, very thoughtful, and again, using that as a bit of a research element when people are using your software to figure out, does that do what they thought it did based on the name? If not, find another name, right? So that the function and the intention are aligned, right? Those are the two things that I'd say you'd need to do to create really simple software. And what you'll notice is, in both cases, it requires a lot of extra work, right? There's a lot of extra research and observation and patience, which is in short supply, particularly in technology. And it requires you to understand that you're going to be wrong and be willing to iterate and fix things quickly. So that's what we've learned.
That's a great point. And I can see the parallels from the technology side of the equation to even the way advisors are interacting in their practices or with their clients. I mean, this idea of testing approaches, testing terminology, testing, and getting feedback from clients of what resonates with them, what their key pain points are, et cetera. I think that there is a danger that we all make in assuming that this is their pain point because the industry tells us, or even assuming that the pain point that the client expressed 4 years ago when they signed up with you continues to be their pain point. So this idea of testing and asking and being humble enough to say that, that the world is changing and that we need to be aware perhaps of how that's changing is pretty critical.
That last point is so important. This most experienced advisors have this sort of danger point that they flirt with all the time, which is experience. And experience is the enemy of humility. And what I'd ask experienced advisors to do is to go back and recheck their assumptions from time to time about what clients want. I don't think your knowledge of managing money or anything, that doesn't change that much. The environment does, and you need to keep up with that. And I would think about clients' wants and needs in a similar way, right? That's the environment you're operating in. You can't simply assume that what people needed 20 years ago is what they need and want today. And most advisors take silence as assent, right? Silence because my clients didn't ask for this, or they didn't tell me they wanted XYZ. It's not their job to tell you what they want. It's your job to go find out.
Totally. And as you're talking, it reminds me of an experience I had a number of years ago. The firm I was at, we were trying to win the CEO of a public company as a client. And after many unsuccessful meetings, it was one of my investment counselors who figured out that it was the CEO's wife that made the personal decisions. So she then started to build a relationship with the wife, and that led to a long-standing, successful billionaire client. All because, as you said, she challenged our initial assumptions and she looked at things. She was humble enough to look at it and sit there and look at it clearly and objectively to say, is what we think the case really the case? And you're so right. Experience is important. I think it is so important. I'm such a big believer that you learn more from experience than anything else. But if you want to continue to learn, we always have to have a degree or dose of humility that sits there and says, okay, is this still the case, right? Is this still the right belief in this case, despite the fact that it was for the last 20 years?
Right. Experience can lead to assumptions, right? And to me, one of the greatest business lessons I've ever learned came from a movie in the 70s, The Bad News Bears, right? If you've never seen it, there's a scene where they talk about not assuming, because assuming makes an ass out of you and me. And I replay that an awful lot in my business life, because every time I've gotten bitten, it's because there was an assumption that went unchallenged.
Too true. Too true. What's the most important lesson you've learned about client engagement throughout your career?
The most important lesson about client engagement is that they don't register all of the messages you think you're sending. That maybe 1 out of 3 or 4 messages lands and they remember it. Maybe, if you're really, really, really lucky. So even if you are sending 100 touch points a year, they might register that you've sent them, a couple of times a month. I know that sounds insane. It's showing up in their inbox, but people aren't thinking about you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one cares about what you're doing or the things that you've done. They care about their life. They care about their problems. And it's only when you're present, when they need something like what you've got, where they connect the two. Otherwise, it's just noise and it just gets suppressed. So you need to be there an awful lot to make them feel like you're there even a little bit.
That's an interesting point. So, because they're not registering to all of your outreach or engagements, one solution, as you say, is to send more to end up with the less that they're getting. Is there something in the content or the type of messaging or how you're messaging that can help increase, call it the open rates or the registering rates that the clients may have?
Yeah. See, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is human behavior and human cognition. And I don't know if there's an advisor out there who knows how to change that. Man, we need to talk, because I bet there's $1 billion product in that. But this is simply the way that people work, right? If you think about the example of the Netflix or Facebook services that we've talked about, even as many messages as you've received, my guess is you can't recount that many. When you think about it, yeah, I see them often, but you have no idea how frequently. It just it doesn't stay. What sticks is the sense that that's a service that I'm connected with, that's touching me frequently. So yes, you want to increase the relevance of individual messages. Absolutely, no question. But there's a real limit to how much one message is going to be perfect and it's going to land and everyone's going to cheer. No one cheers for your content. No one's going to cheer. Wow, that is a great quarterly report. Have you ever seen that happen? Of course not. That just isn't how people work. But people remember how you make them feel. They don't remember the facts, but they remember how you make them feel. And how you make them feel when you're sending out value added messages about them, about their money, about problems they may have, about things you've done for them. They feel cared for. They are sure you care about them. And many advisors do a good job at making their clients feel cared for. So don't get me wrong, but this is another way to ensure across the entire client base, if you've got 100, 200 clients, that they feel that, right? This is the way to systematize
And
that
scale.
sense of caring and scale it. Yeah, exactly.
On that note, can you give an example of how an advisor that you work with has used your platform to transform their client service model? What perhaps might have been their specific challenges, and how did Blue Leaf's platform help them overcome them?
Sure. So I'll share. This is actually an older story, but it's one of my favorites because it was well ahead of its time. But um, the best transformational story that comes to mind for me about how Blue Leaf changed a service model for an advisor is an advisor, $100 million firm, so good size firm, not huge, not small, who wanted to simplify their quarterly reporting process. So they came to us for automated reporting, a very traditional need. And within about 6 months, I saw a story on the Wall Street Journal, their online edition that highlights advisors. And it was a story about this advisor who killed the quarterly report and essentially eliminated the traditional quarterly report in favor of more frequent touch points. And this saved that firm, I think what she told me at the time was 3 to 4 man days a month that they were spending to sort of make sure that all of this stuff was together. And more importantly, she said, was it really ratcheted up their growth and their referrals.
Great.
So you land on the cover of the Wall Street Journal and your business is better off. That feels like a win-win-win.
Sounds like it to me. John, we're coming to the end of our podcast, so I have a few final rapid fire questions for you that I ask all my
Sure.
guests. So number one, professionally, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Systems thinking. So everything that we do or operate in is part of a larger system, which is why so many things that we attempt have unintended consequences. And if we start by thinking about the end goal we want and trying to understand the system we're operating in, we tend to be much more effective. There's a wonderful book by a guy named Peter Senge called The Fifth Discipline. It is about systems thinking. It changed the way I viewed the world, and I would highly recommend it.
Great. I know the book, and I totally agree. It's a wonderful book. What is one practical tip you would offer listeners keen on applying your insights on client engagement?
Pick up on either noisy service as a model or on repurposing your marketing content to be problem solution focused and sending that to your clients. Either one will get you another 25 to 50 touch points a year, and your clients will be better off. You could always come to Blue Leaf and get some other automated stuff, but those things are things you can do right now, today, to change the way that you engage with clients.
John, this is awesome. It's been a great discussion. If listeners want to learn more about you or find out about your work, where do they go?
Easiest place is LinkedIn. I'm just, John Prendergast is my handle on LinkedIn. We're active there every day, and it's very easy to get hold of me there.
Awesome. John, thank you for joining us today on the Future Ready Advisor podcast.
My pleasure. It was really fun.
In this episode, I chatted with John Prendergast, founder and CEO of Blue Leaf, about transforming client engagement in wealth management through innovative use of technology. Here are my 3 key takeaways. Number 1, increase client engagement touchpoints. John made the point that traditional client touchpoints, such as quarterly statements, are no longer enough. He argued for a substantial increase in client interactions, aiming from 70 to 150 touchpoints annually. This can be achieved through a mix of automated messages, personalized videos, and engaging content, which keeps clients consistently informed and connected to their advisors. Number 2, the concept of noisy service. John introduced the idea of noisy service, where even back-end activity such as account reviews or portfolio rebalancing is communicated to the client. This approach transforms typically silent services into opportunities for engagement, thereby enhancing the client's perspective of value and fostering stronger client relationships. Number 3, creating engagement loops with technology. John discussed how financial advisors can learn from digital consumer services like Netflix and Spotify by creating engagement loops. These loops involve regularly reaching out to clients with valuable insights or updates, which keeps the firm top of mind and builds client trust over time. These ideas underscore the importance of proactive communication and personalized service in building lasting client relationships in the modern wealth management landscape. You've been listening to the Future Ready Advisor. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, or share your feedback wherever you listen. Be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. For more insights on how to keep your practice future ready, visit www.samsivarajan.com. You can find the link on the show notes. There you'll find free tools and resources, along with exclusive bonus content from these podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more strategies with you in the next episode.